Good morning and welcome to the Caffeinated Bible. My name is David Paris, and the goal of this channel is to take what I've been teaching in seminary and other institutions for the past 30 years and make it available to a much wider audience within YouTube. So if you like the channel, be sure to subscribe and share it with other people as well. Now, this is the last video I'm going to be doing on parables in this series. I might come back and revisit the parables later on, but we'll see how that goes in the future. For now, this is the last one, and I get to choose my two favorite ones, which was actually a pretty hard choice. Now, throughout this series, I've been saying that the parables are short skeletal stories, but that doesn't mean that they're simple. In fact, the meaning of the parables is anything but simple. There are often layers of meaning that are construed within even the simplest of the parables. Now, with any story, we usually start with an initial situation, and then we move through a sequence of events to a final situation or outcome of the story. And this sequencing of events or actions is what we would call the plot. And it's this sequence then that allows us to make inferences and conclusions off the story. So by way of example, let's take a look at the parable of the mustard seed. In Matthew 13:31, Jesus says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branch." Now, some of the inferences and conclusions that we can draw off the sequence of events in the story, for example, is that of prediction. When the story starts off and it says that a man took a grain of mustard seed and planted it in his field, we know from plants that that is going to grow and develop. We are able to predict where this story is going. Stories also allow us to make evaluations. In this particular story, we're able to make the evaluation that this man was probably a pretty good farmer because of the size that this mustard seed or mustard plant grew to at the end. Or we might look very closely at the words in this story and we would say, wait a second, a mustard seed grows to be a bush. It doesn't grow to be a tree, and it doesn't grow to be a tree that's larger than all the others. Something's gone wrong in the narrative of this story here, that we go from a seed to a bush, but then it becomes a tree at the end. It doesn't fit the logic of what we know about mustard seeds. Stories are also used to make explanations. The speaker uses them to explain something. Jesus is explaining the kingdom of God here. And off the parable, when we read and understand it, we're able then to make explanations ourselves. So in this case, Jesus is trying to explain some of the mysteries of the kingdom of God. How it could be incredibly small, but produce great results. Or maybe it's bringing across the idea that that mustard grain, when it's put in this ground there, no one will ever find it. The kingdom of God is present, but it's invisible. And then parables also allow us to make projections. How does this story then allow us to project meaning and explanation into our life or our situation or what we see taking place in the world? How is the kingdom of God present in my life or my community or my situation? All of these are projections that we make off this parable. Now, having said all that, what I want to do is turn to my two favorite parables. The parable of the treasure hidden in the field and the pearl of great price. Now notice how these two parables also pick up and develop themes that are found in the mustard seed and the leaven. With the parable of the treasure hidden in the field, that treasure is in the field, but no one knows it's there. A lot like the mustard seed. It's just in the field, but no one will ever find it again once the man plants it there. The second thing it brings across is that in the parable of the hidden treasure, it says that the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. And the word for hidden here is the same word that is used in the parable of the leaven, where a woman takes some leaven and then hides it. She doesn't mix it in. She hides it in 3 measures of dough. So it's picking up on themes and words and ideas from those earlier parables but it's bringing across a very different focus. In the parable of the mustard seed and the leaven, it's all about the kingdom of God coming into the world and how that takes place. In these two parables, it's about what happens when the kingdom of God touches someone's life. And we're going to look at that in these two parables. This parable opens with this treasure that is hidden in the field. It's like the woman who hid that leaven in the dough. No one knows that it's there, only she does. But in this case, we're not told who hid it or why. Stories of hidden treasures are not something that came about during the age of the pirates. They were very common during the New Testament era as well. In fact, Flavius Josephus, in his account of the Jewish wars, talks about how the Roman soldiers would find gold or other treasures that the Jews hid within the fields when they saw the Roman armies approaching. And one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Copper Scroll, has a long list of locations and items where buried treasures were hidden throughout Israel. So Jesus' use of a treasure hidden in a field was a common theme in stories told during that time. The next sequence we have is that a man finds. We just have a simple action here, and we have a very generic character, a man. We don't know anything about him. He is just a generic man. Now we can infer a couple things here. One is he has to be in the field and probably passing through it in order to find this treasure. The second thing is we don't know if this person was looking for a treasure or not. All that we know is that he finds it. Probably isn't looking. He's probably going from point A to point B, and he stumbles across this. And from the context of this story, we also know that it's not his field. He has to go and buy it later on. But in the process here, what he does is he covers it up. After he finds it, he covers it up. Now this raises interesting evaluations on his motives here. Why doesn't he tell the landowner, maybe get a share of the reward? It seems like that would be the right thing to do, is if you found something valuable on a person's property, would be to tell them about it. The next sequence is that he goes and he sells all that he has. Now we don't know how much he had, and we don't know how big that field is. So this makes the story open to just about everybody except for the very most destitute members of society. This man is literally turned inside out. He sells everything that he has so that he can have that field. This is total commitment. He gives up everything so that he can possess this one thing. And that really shows a transformation in his life as well, that he is relinquishing everything that he owns possession-wise, because what he has found is so incredible that he's willing to sacrifice all of that to get this. Now the interesting thing is now he's poor and penniless. He sold everything so that he can have this field. But notice the story doesn't tell us what he does with that field. Does he dig up the treasure, or is he just content to own the field knowing that the treasure is in there? We have to make evaluations and projections off the story, really in a large part based on our own theology and how we understand what's taking place here as to what this person is going to do. This story is left very open-ended, and we need to complete it now. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this story is that there's a lot of action and changes in location that's going on here. And let me draw it out to show you. The treasure is hidden in the field here. The man, we infer, is coming along and he finds it. When he finds it, he then goes and sells everything that he has so that he can then come and buy this field. Now what we have here is he started off in an initial situation and he ends up in a different situation. And this really tells us a lot about he is changing locations, but he's also changing commitments, committed to in his life. And that physical location change tells us a lot and helps us infer things from this story. The parable is rather open-ended. It leaves you with this provocative question. Was this man wise or foolish? Was he smart to sell everything so that he might have this one field? What does it mean to make a commitment like that, to sell everything that we have in order that we might possess this one thing? And in this way, the parable presents a challenge to our lives. What is this great thing that we have found, and are we committed to it? Would we sell everything that we have so that we can have this one thing? These actions of finding, selling, and buying present a very skeletal story, but convey a lot of meaning. This man has found something he did not expect. There's an advent, a breaking forth of the kingdom into his life in a very unexpected way. He then goes and sells everything that he has because of what he has just learned and discovered. It provokes a total reversal in his life that he's going to sell everything so that he can now commit to and buy that one thing. So as a result, this parable gives us this very interesting picture of how the kingdom of God invades a person's life. Now in the next story, we're going to take and kind of shift the focus on it and look at this aspect of how the kingdom of God touches a person's life from a slightly different angle. In Matthew 13:45, the very next verse, Jesus continues, he says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value, went out and sold all that he had and bought it." Now, as opposed to the man who finds the treasure in the field, it's sort of like this spontaneous advent, this revealing of the kingdom in his life. This person is pictured as someone who's on a diligent search to find that pearl. He's looking for something. Now we need to understand some background about pearls during the New Testament era. Pearls were incredibly valuable. They were as valuable as gold, or perhaps even more so. Today it's not like going out and buying a string of pearls at a jewelry store or a department store, which may or may not be expensive. During that day, they were incredibly valuable. And there's a very famous story that is told by Pliny the Younger of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Pliny the Younger, in his Natural History, writes, "The last of the Egyptian queens," referring to Cleopatra, "owned the two largest pearls of all time, left to her by Oriental kings. When Antony was stuffing himself daily with rare foods, she proudly and impertinently said, like the royal harlot that she was, sneered at his attempts at luxury and extravagance. When he asked her what could be added in the way of sumptuousness, she replied that she would use up 10 million sestertii, or probably about $500,000 worth of gold, on one dinner. Antony was eager to learn about it, but didn't think it could be done. So they made the bet, and on the next day, when the bet was to be decided, she set before Antony a dinner that under other circumstances would have been a magnificent one, but was an everyday affair for Antony. She did this so that the day would not be entirely wasted. Antony laughed at her and asked for the reckoning, but she said that this was merely a preliminary and assured him that the real banquet would use up the estimated sum and that she would consume the $500,000 dinner all by herself. She then ordered the dessert to be served. According to the instructions, the servants placed one dish before her containing vinegar, whose acidity and strength dissolves pearls into slush. She was at the time wearing in her ears that remarkable and truly unique work of nature known as the pearls. So while Antony was wondering what in the world she was going to do, she took one pearl from her ear and plunged it into the vinegar, and it was dissolved. She then swallowed it. Lucius Plancus, who was refereeing the bet, put his hand on the other pearl as she was preparing to dissolve it in the same manner, and declared Antony the loser. This was a definite omen of Antony's fate. The fame of the pearl attended its mate, which was cut in two when the queen who had won in this important case was captured. Half of the dinner of Antony and Cleopatra was put in each ear of the statue of Venus in the Pantheon at Rome. Now, the reason why I read this story is so that you can see the value of this pearl of great price that this merchant finds. Now, this parable also shares similar structure with that of the treasure of the field. There is an incredible treasure to be found. There is a finding, there is a selling, and then there is a buying that takes place. And all that is wrapped up into this short story. And as a result, it gives us a very similar sort of inferencing and projection and planning that we can make off this story as well. However, in this story, as I mentioned, the person, the merchant, is searching for this pearl. In the previous one, this guy just seems to stumble upon it. But it produces the same result, that he goes and sells all that he has so that he might buy this one pearl. However, the difference here comes if we draw this out. There's not a change in location. In this one, it's a change of possessions. We start off with the merchant, and he's seeking. This means that there's sort of a void in his life. And then when he finds this one pearl, he then sells all that he has so that he might own that one pearl. We don't know if he changed locations, moved out of his house, or anything like this. All that we know is that he sells everything so he can possess it. So it's this change in state from not owning to owning that's the key thing. However, both parables talk about human experience to the advent or the dawn of the kingdom of God within a person's life. In the first parable, it's a man who's not looking for it, but he finds it. It's this sudden dawning in his life. In the second one, we have a person who recognizes that he's looking for something, and then when he finds it, we see this total reversal taking place in his life as well. In both these cases, we see the earnestness of these people. They go and they sell all that they have. We're talking home, clothing, everything, in order that they might possess this one thing. There is a radical commitment that they make in disavowing the past in order to own the potential of this future. In both of these parables, the kingdom that Jesus is talking about is greater than one could ever imagine. The other thing that these parables really bring across is this idea that I like to refer to as 3 R's. No regrets, no remorse, no retreat. Each one of these people, when they find that, they sell all they have so they can possess it. They are fully committed to owning this incredible treasure that has dawned in their lives. And I hope you have had that same experience and realize the value of it within your lives. I will leave you with that. These are 2 pretty heavy parables, and next week we move on to a different topic. Peace.